Good morning. My name is Joe Kent, and I'm here with Ken Schoolland. Ken is an associate professor of economics and political science at Hawaii Pacific University. He wrote The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible. Thanks for joining me today, Ken.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Appreciate it.
So today I just want to talk about different layman's issues on Maui. I know you're from Oahu, but I still want to hear your opinion about some of these issues. And let me just sort of go around the world here, or around the island. I want to start with the Maui bus. Our public bus system is millions of dollars in debt right now, and I think they want to build a new double-decker bus. And so I'm just wondering, what should be done about public transportation, in your opinion?
I think probably the best thing to start on public transportation would be to get rid of the Public Utilities Commission, which stands in the way of competition. You know, back in the 1940, we had, over on Oahu, we had a lot of competition, more than 7 buses, jitneys, and operators that were in competition with each other. Then one bus, the major bus, wanted to eliminate all the competition. They went to the Public Utilities Commission, asked for a cease and desist order to get rid of them all. Well, they held a hearing, and the public came out in great force for all the competition. They said the Rosecrans Bus Company serves us better, serves us at lower prices, friendlier service, and all the jitney companies go further up at the valleys later at night. Leave the competition, it's good. Public Utilities Commission, held a closed-door hearing. The next day they announced a cease and desist order against all the competition. And so we haven't had real competition in transportation for over 70 years. The Hilo Sampan wanted to start up or even bus service at all over on the Big Island. And then all you have to have is one complaint from a taxi driver say, well, we want to have the Public Utilities Commission review their right to exist. And so the legal process was enough to shut them down. Get rid of all the barriers that protect certain favored special interess, and allow people just to compete and let them serve the customer, and the customer, through choice, will find the best services. You'll have a lot more options here on the island of Maui if you have the Public Utilities Commission just step out of the way, save a lot of money, and allow people to provide the variety of transportation services that would be attractive, that would be efficient, that would be low price, that would be innovative.
It would be low priced. I mean, the argument is that if we've got all these private bus companies coming in, they'll just charge through the roof, and it won't be what it is now, $4 for.
That's what favored monopolies always say. Yeah, our competitors, they're going to be higher priced. Well, if they are higher priced, then they wouldn't get. Look at all the advantages that the guys already in place have. They're already in place, and if they can't stand the competition, I mean, it's for reasons that are other than in the public interest. You can never count on this crony capitalism, the favoritism, the special interest deals that go on with the politicians and the guys who fund their campaigns to provide real good services.
All right, I want to move to the airlines. A lot of people say that there's a monopoly in the airline industry, that prices have risen, and ever since the fall of Aloha. But then at the same time, we've got different carriers. What's going on in the airline industry? Is there a monopoly?
Well, the same kind of regulatory control that we have over the buses locally, we have over the airlines. And it's even worse because we would have a lot more competition, I think, if it wasn't for the Jones Act that also affects airlines. We would have a lot more competition if the government didn't have to approve and authorize every entry into the market, and requiring a certain amount of American ownership and that sort of thing.
How does the Jones Act affect the airline industry?
Well, it's my understanding that international airlines that could be coming here are restricted. They can't go from one. Ships can't go from one American port to another American port, and it's my understanding that airlines are restricted in the same way, so that it reduces a lot of the traffic that we could get from a multitude of international carriers, as well as the restrictions on ownership. That say, well, to operate an American airline service, you have to have some American degree of ownership, and I think that just eliminates a lot of possibilities. And the Public Utilities Commission just has to authorize these things. I don't think that sort of thing is necessary for inter-island service. In fact, I think that there would be a lot more services by sea as well as by air if we had the government stand out of the way and let people freely choose what kind of services that they wanted to offer.
Can you explain exactly what is the Jones Act, and just in layman's terms?
Yeah, the Jones Act says that if you want to go from one American port to another American port, you've got to be on an American-owned vessel, American-operated vessel, built on a vessel that was, operating on a vessel that was built in America, an American flag vessel. Well, these are very, very expensive things today because there's not that much in the country being built in America because our labor costs are very high. We've been so long protected that we've been out of the market in terms of really competing on efficiencies in the shipbuilding and ship operating business.
And do they cause our prices here to rise?
They do very much so. You consider that, let's say a ship might be going from Hong Kong to Los Angeles, could stop off here, unload a lot of cargo, go to Los Angeles, and then come back here, unload a lot of cargo, and then go back on to Hong Kong. It's the main traffic lane.
They have to take two, so you're saying they have to take two trips rather than
well,
just one.
They can't stop here at all and then go on to another American port. So that means they have to bypass Hawaii, and then they can go into Los Angeles. And then they have to ship by Matson or Horizon in order to be able to have anything come here. And Bloomberg has recently indicated that raised our costs maybe as much as 30%. There's a lot of different analyses done by the International Trade Commission and others, but it has undoubtedly raised our costs a lot, shut down a lot of businesses, eliminated a lot of opportunities, whereas we should be the hub of the Pacific. We should have a port here like Singapore, where you take people and ships and from all over the world and freely operating at low costs.
But without the Jones Act, we would see a lot of things on the island 30% cheaper?
I think there'd be a lot cheaper. I don't know exactly how much.
Yeah.
Each item would vary, but the point is the free market allows a lot more opportunities for lower costs, better service, and more innovation.
Just jumping around the board here, I'm wondering about balancing the budget. If you could balance the state's budget, what would you keep and what would you cut?
Oh, well, I'd cut right away everything that's going into this railroad on Oahu. I've always been puzzled. Well, why is this an expense that people from all the islands are going to have to bear too? But even beyond that, this is a cost that is greater than the new Panama Canal, and I'm very, very suspicious about any of the information that is said is so feasible when these costs and these analysis, the politicians are so closely connected through their campaign funding and even the money that was supposed to be spent on so-called education of the public was spent really primarily promoting the pro-rail operation.
But don't we need rail because it's so congested on Oahu and I mean, wouldn't it just get worse and worse? Oahu is pretty congested already.
Well, this goes back to my first point that for 70 years we've had no competition with public transportation. You know, how much more attractive could a public transportation be if we really had competition with the bus and you had opportunities for people to provide a variety of services? I'd also much prefer a thing called variable road pricing, where you have people during rush hour pay for the road a fee for using it during a peak rush hour, in which case people would moderate their usage of the road so that you'd have much freer flowing all day long. And besides, the major obstacle during the rush hour in recent days has just been the government's bad timing for their repair jobs.
Yeah, we've all seen that. But you're saying that roads are congested because they're free.
Yeah. They perceived it as being free. Of course, everybody pays for it, and it's subsidized so heavily in some ways too from other states, which means we get to subsidize roads all over the country in the same manner. So it's not really free to us, but it's perceived as being free. And suppose that you could go into the store and every store said, well, steaks are free this week, well, there'd be a lineup of steaks and they'd be gone pretty quickly. Everybody would be taking the thing that's free when it's really not. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. Somebody's got to pay for it somewhere. And if you disconnect the use of it from the guy who's paying for it, then you're not going to have wise use. I mean, it's just like, were you going to spend your own money better or his money better?
Right.
You spend your own money a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of free, I'm talking about free parks now. On Maui, we have a park. It's called Moku'ula. It's the ancient Hawaiian home of King Kamehameha III. It's on the National Register. But the park is it was filled in, and now it's a baseball field. And now it's an abandoned baseball field. Nobody uses it anymore. And there were right now all you see there are bums and beer bottles, and there's a lot of public outcry about what should be done about the park. Should the government try to make a tourist attraction out of it? Should they sell it off to a private organization? Should they do nothing? And a lot of local groups are just, it's a hot topic right now. So what is your opinion? I know that you're not from Maui, but still, what is your opinion about that?
Well, we have similar issues over on Oahu, too. First, let me mention this one thing. You mentioned there are bums there, and we've got a lot of homeless people over on Hawaii, on Oahu, too. And I attribute this to another government policy that has restricted land area so much that land prices are very high and housing prices are very high. And then they also pass laws forbidding the cheapest form of low cost and good housing is mobile homes. That's outlawed on the islands here. To my knowledge on the Maui too, but it certainly is on Oahu. I mean, a lot of very low cost homes that are available on the mainland. You can get homes for a couple $1,000s for double wide.
So you're saying that mobile homes are illegal here?
Yeah.
Oh.
A lot of housing is. I mean, you go to try to build or do anything with housing, you run up against government regulations and barriers and requirements and who's going to build it and how it's going to be built and all that sort of thing. A lot of mine matters of safety, but most all of this is intended to protect the real estate market. They limit the land use here to 5% of the land for all commercial and residential use. And that means, for conservation and agriculture, they do fine in the state in terms of the amount of land that they have. But for living, for people who need homes, housing prices are extraordinarily expensive, among the highest in the country. And they say it's a shortage of land. No, it's a shortage of zoned land where they're allowed to use it for housing. So I would say allow people to have this low-cost opportunities for housing, and you won't have this homeless problem in the first place. Okay, now back to your parks issue.
Okay.
You mentioned, should the government build a tourist attraction for... Let the tourist industry build the tour attraction. If they're the ones who want to attract tourists, then let them buy the park, manage the park, and you can bet that it's going to be as nice as the park facilities around the Sheraton Hotel.
I mean, the argument though is that if because it's such a sensitive area, there's so much history there that if it were privately run, they'd turn it into Disneyland, and it wouldn't do the park justice to what its history and our community wants, I guess. So if it were a private park, then what do you say about them turning it into Disneyland versus the government doing it better?
Well, the tourist industry is smart enough to know that tourists come because they want to see the historic site. They don't want to come for Disneyland. If they want that, they can go to Disneyland. But also you can make as condition of sale covenants that restrict the kind of use or the purpose of the use of it. But that's certainly better than leaving it as a trash pit where nobody cares for it or pays any attention to it. Mm-hmm. Now, as I'm not particularly fond of kings. I believe that a lot of them got their power and their rule by oppressive means and so on like that. So I have no fondness for kings. But if people want to go to a tourist destination to revere kings or Hawaii history and so on, I believe that that people who individually value that should pay for it, and rather than put that burden on other people who have other things for their lives. You know, why should a few officials in government decide what all of us should value, when in fact this is a free society, should be a free society, where the government should simply be neutral, and we should be able to express our own values and opinions the way we wish, rather than to have it all directed by some guys that get elected by special interest groups into positions of power and tell us all what we should think and feel.
Okay, Monsanto. Monsanto is here on the island. It's on Maui. They love being here because of the seasons, but a lot of people here don't like them here. There's a big movement. There's a protest a few weeks ago, evict Monsanto, and thousands of people showed up. One of the main things that they want is to label products that are GMO. What's your opinion of that whole debate?
Well, frankly, I don't mind so much labeling things, and I think that the thing that would motivate people to demand that by consumers. In other words, why is it that consumers in the supermarket don't ask for labeling? I mean, they could say, well, we're not going to buy anything that doesn't label it non-GMO or GMO. Why aren't they? Well, so far they haven't perceived that there's any that great threat or injury. There isn't really that much. There is, to my knowledge, there is no scientific proof of this. So there is a fear of that it might become harmful one day, that the eating of things that have been genetically modified. But we've always been eating things that have been genetically modified, but not in this manner. I mean, crossbreeding and the shaping of our food, corn and wheat and steak and all of this has been going on for hundreds of years. Recently it's been done in a much more specific way through genetic modification directly by specific genes. And when there is some injury, I think that Monsanto and anybody that produces the particular strain should be held liable for these injuries. But until there's proof of it, then I think you need to rely on the consumer to make decisions for themselves. You know, I mean, it's not a very large crowd of people demanding that I should eat a certain way. I think that's up to me. And if I feel concerned enough about what I put in my body, then I will ask, well, I'm not going to eat things that don't have the labeling.
What about the government saying to all businesses, all food, you got to label GMO if you've got any sort of GMO in your product? Do you think that would have an effect at the supermarket?
I don't know, because but my guess is until the general consumer perceives that there's a real risk of injury, that they probably won't pay much attention to it. And there has to be proof of it. I mean, you can clamor about the fear of what might be endlessly, in which case you give up on an awful lot of potential good that can come from GMOs. I mean, consider what can happen for the world if genetically modified food can make it so that that places that can't grow any food at all, that are going to be wiped out by insects, wiped out by disease, are things that can be protected by this genetic modification. Now, this has so far been sort of the dream of hungry populations around the world throughout history. And then to say, well, we can't allow it because we fear what it might do, what injury might occur after some time. Well, people are, for the most part, living longer and healthier lives because of the things that science and technology have brought to us. And I believe that when there is injury, that those who bring the injury, including Monsanto or others, should be held personally and liable for the injury. But so far, the injury isn't there. The huge potential is there, and I'm constantly worried about what I fear is the things that our fellow human beings in their panic are going to prevent from us having.
Mm-mm. It's your fear of not having enough food rather than having the food.
Not having freedom.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
you can get a panic and a fear about everything, and they'll take away our freedoms at a drop of a hat because of what some political leader says. Well, we know what's best for you.
Right.
Well, I just don't trust that. Usually the government always offers solutions to problems, but I first like to ask, did the government do something to cause the problems in the first place? If we have shortages of food, I don't look around and say, well, gee, how can the government provide more food? I say, what about all those trade barriers and restrictions that prevent us from buying our food from the lowest income, poorest people all around the world? And those trade barriers are preventing us from buying low-cost, inexpensive food from all those places. Instead of having Monsanto on here, we ought to be saying, well, let us buy our sugar from the Philippines instead, or buy our soybeans from Dominican Republic or something, other countries that are producing it.
That's a great point. Okay, education. Hawaii pays among the most for education, but we get the least. What are some solutions to the education? Should we just get rid of the whole thing? Our vouchers, charter schools? What's the solution that you see?
Well, there again, where most people see the government as the solution, I see the government as the problem, the source of the problem. The fact that the government has said, well, a government monopoly school is going to be the way to provide the best education. And frankly, I would leave that choice up to the parents and the students. And sure, a voucher system is an excellent way of allowing the parents to choose, and having competition always provides better innovation, services, and choice. Now, those providing it may not like that, but those who are the customers, which are the students and parents, have a great deal to gain by that sort of thing. But I'd even go further than that. I think that young people shouldn't be treated as slaves of the state for the first 12 years of their lives, where they're told exactly, this is the one shoe fits all, this is the way that everybody has to learn in a government school. I think that a lot of young people throughout history have felt that have come to the realization that a very good way of learning is by imitating your elders. Why separate them and keep them out from society and keep them from being a part of the marketplace where they can learn and follow what their elders are doing? Through most of history, people lived to a ripe old age of maybe 20 or 21 years of age. And that's the time we'd say, oh, well, now you're just about graduating and about ready to start your life. Well, I think that people are capable of a lot of learning when they're motivated. And right now, they're not motivated. It's just sitting and listening to some, teacher in a practice format of a schoolroom where they just have to follow orders all day long. And you actually look at the results, and a lot of them aren't learning there. But they could be learning if they were motivated by the things that drive all of us in life. We're driven by a lot of different motives, not just one.
If let's say that the choice is given to the consumer or the individual about education, or the parents, well, what about those that can't make as many choices? What about those that are poor, and should those children just not go to school? And how cheap would how inexpensive would a private system of education be? I'm talking about a free market system.
Right. Well, we really don't know until we allow freedom to reign. But imagine if the government took over all distribution of food. Let's say, well, sorry, private restaurants are going to work. We're going to have a government restaurant, government cafeterias. Everybody has to go to what I called in my book the politicaves, political cafeterias, where the government would decide what we eat, would decide what we're going to pay, what we're going to where we have to go, and then this board of digestion would determine, well, we're all going to eat noodles this week. And then next week, well, we'll all eat rice. Yeah. And then the potato lobby would come in and say, well, we want potatoes, and then that's what everyone's, given a little bit of time like that, you're going to have a lot of truants. A lot of people are going to try and duck out and sneak to the black market of restaurants and food and back alley kitchens and everything else, where they're really going to get something that they like. Mm-hmm. Well, that's sort of what we've got here with the education system. I think that the poor have the greatest amount to gain by a truly innovative, creative system of education that treats them as individuals rather than as cogs in a wheel that have to fit into the government education system.
So if we give it to the free market, then now you've got McDonald's school, you've got the Walmart school, and the
Macy's school.
Yeah. Come to Costco High. I mean, doesn't that seem dirty or filthy?
Well, I mean, it doesn't matter what I think. That's where people go. People are going to those places because they have these varieties of food. Now, if I'm a government bureaucrat or a politician who's a very elitist, say, well, no, everybody's got to go to the same school that I did and learn in the same manner I did. That's very arrogant, very paternalistic. And I think that allowing people the freedom of choice in education is more important than where they go for food. And we would never consider this sort of stuff for food under this society. My wife grew up in China under the Cultural Revolution, and they did try it there for food as well, and they all starved by the millions, wow. By having the government determine, everyone's going to eat in the government kitchen, and we'll have food served by directive, by central planning. And let me mention that too, that the innovation in school has a great deal to offer for people with less income than others. I mean, the people who are rich are I'm not worried about them. They're going to be able to find lots of choices. What we really want are a lot more choices for the people of low income. And you even find that even like Punahou and Kamehameha, they set up huge scholarships so that they can provide access to people who can't afford the schools at their best education, and in which case the wealthier parents are paying for the lower income parents, because it's good for their reputation, good for their image, and they value it.
And that creates incentive for kids to do well in school so that they can keep getting the scholarships and so on.
Yeah. And with more competition, all prices come down. You're not going to have just monopolies of prestige.
Okay, moving on. Business. Hawaii ranks next to last. I'm not sure if it's last currently, but it's almost there in business friendliness. What are some examples of regulation you might want to get rid of?
Well, these on transportation. The Jones Act is the number one that I think is impacting Hawaii. Land control and land use. The very, very strict, tight controls. We have prices that are up around over $600,000 for the price of a house. Most of that, half of that at least, is just in the price of the land. All of these prices.
The argument for that is, then you've got. Look at these beautiful mountains behind us. You've got. It's filled with mobile homes and skyscrapers and dust and dirt. I mean, isn't there something to say that we want to protect the beauty of Maui and the beauty of Hawaii?
Well, yes. But who's to decide? That's always the question. If people, it's nice enough for people to say, well, we enjoy the beauty of that mountainside from our house, but what about other people who might prefer the trade-off? We're always facing scarcity in life, always choices. What we call in economics opportunity cost. What's the next best thing you'd give up in order to get something? Well, a lot of times, if people have to give up the pristine view of the island in order to live in a very nice and comfortable home, they're willing to do that, I think. And the best way to have a perfectly pristine island is not to allow any people here at all. Okay, the one guy who gets here, you could say he has tarnished the island because now he's one person here, gets to enjoy all the island's beauty. But I like the fact that a lot of people can live here as comfortably as they do. And sure, there is something that's changed about an island, but I don't always consider that that something that is in its natural state is necessarily better if the human beings that are living on here have to live in squalor to pay for it. I mean, I think that the human being is more important than the pristine view of nature.
Are there free market examples of protection of something like the beauty of a mountain or something like that without the government zoning it as a public land?
Well, frankly, I think that the United States would have a lot more pristine wilderness and nature without the government building highways all over the place, without the government building urban sprawl in all of its manners, and the largest way has been highways and the zoning laws that don't allow us to build up. That means we have to build out further. There hasn't. The government has intervened all along. The government took the land away from the natives. It took the land away from the Indians, and then decided to build railroads across the mainland. All of these were enormous interventions, and people don't say, gee, they despoiled the environment. Well, they did. I mean, suppose if we really had to live in an efficient manner in a market system, I don't think we'd have quite the same incentive to build the roads and as much sprawl as we've done so. I think the market has a lot more opportunities for leaving wilderness because it costs. When I lived up in Alaska, the Forest Service was paying $13 to manage the forests for every single dollar of revenue they got from the timber companies that were cutting the trees. And I asked the Forest Service director, well, why is that? What's going on here? Oh, well, we build logging roads for all the logging companies. That's the only reason they could take all those the timber up there in Alaska and in most of the forests across the country, because, in fact, John Bodden, an economist that's here at this conference here, John Bodden was saying that there's you consider the entire interstate highway system. Think of it on the map. The entire interstate highway system, in green lines, usually crisscrossing north, south, east, west. Multiply the number of miles in the entire interstate highway system by 8, and you got the number of miles of logging roads that the Forest Service builds to help logging companies take the timber. You couldn't do it without massive government subsidy. Number one, taking the land from the Indians, who had the rightful homesteading rights to the land, and number two, subsidizing it by taxing taxpayers from all over the country to help special interests take the resources. I mean, you'd have much greater wilderness without the government's intervention. Don't consider the government as the protector of the land. They are the protector of the special interest groups that want to mine the land and take the timber and the resources, and then they give you the image that they're the ones that are the protectors. I don't believe it.
Speaking of environmental protection, I'm talking about sugarcane. On Maui is the last island that actually produces sugarcane, and there are, I don't know if you've seen it when you were here, but sometimes they call it sugarcane burning, and there's a big plume of smoke up in the sky, and it rains down ash onto everyone's homes, and I mean, it looks really bad. I'm wondering if you know anything about the situation, and is the solution to sue the company, or what do you see as a solution?
Two issues here. Mm-hmm. One is sugar itself. Frankly, sugar has owed its existence here in recent years to protectionism. That it prevents us from buying much cheaper sugar from our allies in the Pacific, like the Philippines. We could be buying our sugar from there and helping them out. Instead of sending foreign aid to the leaders, we would be buying from the people who are producing sugar, and we'd be able to eating a much lower cost sugar here. And I think that's by allowing our own consumers freedom of choice, which is what we've been preaching to the world about free markets. I follow the free markets, don't follow the communist system of controls and central planning. But with certain industries with an enormous amount of political clout, we have prohibited our consumers from paying for low cost sugar. So then we've got a sugar industry here, when in fact I think we could have a lot more diversity in agriculture, especially with eliminating the Jones Act, where it was a lot cheaper to import and export agricultural products from this area, where we could be producing flowers for the world, we could be producing coffee for the world, we could be producing a lot of other things. Okay, so that's my beef with sugar.
Right. Okay.
That it's a highly protected market. Those trade barriers would probably end sugar production here, except as a museum. Now, when they have this
cane burning,
sure, it's pollution. If I dumped garbage on your yard, you'd insist that I come and clean it up. And if I take the government air and dump it into the air and then dump it onto your yard or in your lungs, I should have to clean it up. But they don't, because they can say to the politicians, well, it didn't come from us directly, it went through the government's air. Well, I'd say you're just as responsible for the injury you do to somebody. And any company that's doing injury to any other person, whether it's a company or a person, you're responsible for it. And sure, yeah, you should be able to sue them.
So
but then the courts are so inefficient, they probably would take years of settling it, and probably wouldn't, who knows if they'd settle in your favor or in the favor of the guy who paid the most expensive lawyer.
Do you know if there's cases in history where people have come up and sued a company that's like something like air pollution, where it pollutes everyone, where they've successfully litigated against something like that, or water pollution? Or is it usually that, well, the big guy gets to pollute as much as he wants, and we just have to put up with it?
Well, that's the sad, tragic course that the legal system has taken, pretty much. Yeah, it started, I think. There were examples of the railroads. There were farmers who didn't like the sparks that were going from these old locomotives and starting fires in their fields, and they protested about it. And the courts just ruled, well, it's in the public interest that the larger public railroad should be allowed to go through. Well, we do that with eminent domain. Whenever the government says, well, this guy can develop the land and develop the property and pay more in taxes, then through eminent domain, we can condemn your property, which we think you're not making as good a use for, and we'll give it to this guy who can make a better use for it. They do that all the time. They do it for a lot of the hotels or retail outlets and so on like that.
They're saying that for pollution like that, it's almost like a diffused version of eminent domain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Whereas I think that if they were really protecting rights, individual rights, it wouldn't matter how big you are. You just don't have a right to do it. Just because I'm bigger than you doesn't mean that I have a right to steal your property or your money or your health.
Okay.
And figuring into this battle over rights is maybe Monsanto is a big lobbyist for this stuff and playing its case with the politicians and setting the rules in that way too. And so I'm really suspicious about
both sides,
the political side, because it's been done in so many other ways. It could be going on there too.
Okay, I want to talk about water. Now, right now they have something in upcountry called the water meter list. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a lot of people aren't allowed to get water, so they own the land, they build a house, they can't get hooked up to the water. And it's because of the price. There's price fixing here, so they don't want to raise the price of the water. So then they get put on a list, and the list is a mile long, and so it restricts anyone building. Now, the argument against that is, well, if we have a free market system of water, well, then all the water would just get used up. And our water is scarce as it is. What is your opinion about that kind of situation?
I'd say that the reason we have water shortages right now is because there is a huge, everything in nature is, you could say, there's a scarcity issue with, well, how to deal with it. If you have a government come in and set up the political distribution of that stuff, or do you have people in the market providing it for by production and distribution and pricing. right now, I don't know exactly so much about Maui, but on Oahu, most of the water goes to agriculture because it's very low priced. And if you priced water the same, then people drinking the water and so on in the cities would have much more of an abundance of water. Golf courses get water at the low price, and agriculture gets water at a low price. And I think that's because of the lobbying and political impact of those particular sectors of the economy. Frankly, I think that water, as in all other areas of the economy, would be much more efficiently provided at lower prices and much more with much more innovation in how to get it to consumers who really value it. Now, it's true, big purchasers can purchase high volume and so on like that, but through the political system, they don't have to even justify it economically. They can just justify it by campaign contributions and all. I don't trust the bureaucracy any more than I trust them to control our transportation system. I'm very skeptical about the way they've stepped in, and so I think an alternative might be competition, bidding for the water distribution services, and with a limited contract, you do a good job and you provide it to everybody at a low price, very good quality, efficiently. And if you don't, then you lose your contract. You ask that of the water board: are they going to lose their contract if things are badly distributed, badly handled? Can you fire anybody who doesn't do a good job? Can you, as a matter of fact, people who don't do good jobs, and a lot of times in bureaucracy, they get promoted because they put in time, they're senior. But with competition, you have a lot more incentives to be efficient. So set up a contract that builds into it all the things you want to provide as services for the customer. Make it very open bidding process, and then let competition determine who's going to provide it better.
What if the price goes up?
Well, if the price goes up, it goes up because of shortage. I mean, you can if you price something so low that until you run out. Remember, pricing just determines the rationing, how careful or reckless you're going to be in its use. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, for example, that the price of oil went up if it meant then we had to drive more fuel-efficient cars, if the price of water goes up, and that means then we can't just flood our yard because we've got it real cheap. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It means we have to be better stewards of our usage of it. And we do that when we pay out of our own pocket rather than expecting somebody else to pay for it.
Along with utilities, how about electricity? Right here on Maui, we've got, I don't know if you've seen the big windmills, and I think Maui Electric is basically a public utility. Could the private system do that better too?
Oh yes. There are many cities across the country that have competing electric utility companies, and their rates are about a third lower. Their output is greater. Their profits are lower. Where they actually have to compete, and they actually provide a lot more services to their customers, advising them on how to cut back on services. They're a lot friendlier. They try to provide good quality, steady service, and consider their incentive. If they don't do well, you can, with a phone call, you can switch electric utility companies. You can't do that here with Maui Electric or Hawaiian Electric over on Oahu. You can't just call them up and say, well, I got really rude service and the prices are intolerable and you guys don't care and they power outages all the time. I'm going to switch companies. But you should be able to, and you can, and many cities have this sort of thing. As a matter of fact, across the country, there used to be, at the turn of the last century, there were the majority of towns had competing electric utility companies. Then this wave of franchises, government-regulated franchises, came in and eliminated all the competing areas in order to establish monopolies. Well, if monopolies were actually if competition was so bad, then why was it that the main promoters of this were the guys who were getting the monopolies? They didn't want the competition.
Right.
So another thing, one reason why we have high electricity prices here is because of the high price of oil, where a lot of our electricity is generated from the oil that we import from abroad. Frankly, I think you mentioned wind farms. That might be a good alternative. The thing is, it's in a true marketplace where you have competing economic uses that you find out which is the most the best use, and you really don't have the competition when you consider. I consider oil prices are very heavily subsidized by the federal government. The federal government provides the protection and insurance costs for most of our sources of oil abroad, or if not ours, for many other countries. This massive war in the Middle East, I think, is providing, to a great extent, the presence of the U.S. Military in much of the world is providing essentially a protection and insurance subsidy to the oil industry. We don't provide this kind of military presence in the middle of Africa where there aren't any oil interests. We do it in the Middle East where there are. And I think without this military presence, the price of oil coming from those regions would be much higher, because it's much riskier to do business in such volatile regions of the world.
And then we'd have alternatives.
That's right. Then either other places for oil, such as Canada, would seem much more attractive, or other kinds of energy, such as wind and geothermal and tidal and all that sort of thing, would become much more feasible now when you consider the real cost of oil from abroad.
People think more creatively when the government gets out of the way.
I think so, yeah. That's right.
Okay, right now on Maui, we have a bag ban. There's no plastic bags allowed, at first, there's this picture in the Maui News of the bags are flying out of the landfill, and you see it just covering the trees. And now, ever since the bag ban, no more bags. So isn't that a win for government?
Well, of course, I agree that it's nice not to have bags floating all over the place. But my first question is, well, who owns the landfill?
The government owns the landfill.
The government owns the landfill. I'd say they're doing a pretty bad job, and they put the burden of doing a good job on individual consumers then, who are restricted in what they can use that could go into the landfill. Well, if this was a private company, you'd say, well, excuse me, you're fired. We're going to do somebody who can do a better job. And believe me, there are a lot of landfill companies around the country who will offer, as part of their contract, services, prices, and conditions of service that they have to in a competitive market in order to get the business and get the contract. So when you've got a government that doesn't have to care about those things, you don't have the same kind of incentives.
So if the landfill pollutes, then it goes out of business?
Yeah. If it pollutes and is an eyesore and all the things that your community doesn't want, fire them, get another one that's going to do it better.
Okay. I guess, that's all the questions I have, but I wanted to talk about your book. Ken is the author of The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, and it's a free market look at it's a kid's book, kind of, and it's a narrative look at economics. Could you talk a little bit about your book?
Sure.
There you go.
Well, actually, it started off on an all-news business radio station here in the islands, on Oahu, because it was a way of talking about the economic issues here in the islands to the business community. And they liked the stories and all, and so I was persuaded by Sam Sloan of Small Business Hawaii to publish it as a book. And the book took off internationally. Actually, it's now published in 48 languages. There's actually 73 publications of the book, because many languages have gone through several editions and upgrades. We have commentary editions. We've got plays that have been written based on this that are touring Africa and Eastern Europe. There's even I just got a word last week that Kazakhstan is going to make a musical of it.
Oh my goodness! Why do you think there's so much international interest in your book?
Because throughout the world, they've all been fed up with the state and government controls over everything, and they're trying to experiment with free markets for the first time. And they're very excited about free market alternatives, and the respect for individual rights and individual freedom, rather than having you have to paternalistically go to the government for everything that you want, the dependency on government. Well, it's taking off in countries. It's the first free market book published in Vietnam just last summer. It was the first free market book published in Russia after the fall of the Iron Curtain. It's now been published twice in China, where they're quite eager to learn about free market solutions as opposed to just government bureaucratic solutions.
But I mean, isn't there free market? Aren't there free market books? A lot of free market books out there, but why have they gravitated so much to your book?
Well, I think that just like The Little Prince and Gulliver's Travels, they're able to tell philosophical messages in a very fun and friendly way. Usually, satire and humor are ways of getting around censors. And that's why the Farsi edition was approved by the mullahs in Iran. And they said, oh, okay, let it pass. The thing is, it isn't just for the youth mind. We put a lot of illustrations in this and all to give it an appeal to younger people, maybe high school age. Mm-hmm. But the editions that have been published, for example, it was serialized in the Hong Kong Economic Journal, clearly for the intellectual and business community there. The Keizai Seminar magazine in Japan was clearly an academic university-level journal. It's been published now in Germany in a sort of a business traveler's paperback. A lot of these are because people of all ages are enjoying the having pointed out some of the messages of markets and individual rights and why that has a good alternative to the way they've always been running things. So I'm holding out hope. We even have a team in California that's putting together an animated film. People that have worked with DreamWorks and Universal and studios and all. They've decided they're going to make a film out of this. They've put together a business plan. Are seeking investors right now. But I'd say it's got a big appeal because freedom has always had an appeal, and satire is a way of sort of mocking the way that we've always been looking at it, that we had to accept it because some government official and politicians and insiders decided that we had to run our lives. Take, for example, the way we shape our lives over there on the tax code. One of the chapters is about the tall tax. Jonathan comes up to this guy who's walking on his knees, and he says, "What's going on here?" He says, well, "Can I help you up?" And he's, "Oh, no, I'm trying to avoid the tall tax." "The tall tax? What's that?" Well, it seems that the government decided that it was unfair that some people were taller than others, favors in promotion and jobs and marriage and even politics. So they decided to level the playing field. They're going to tax everybody according to height. Well, gee, why do that? Well, then, I'm walking around on my knees now so that I can reduce my tax. And it's a way of pointing out how people shape their lives to the tax code. You look at our tax code, it's extremely complicated. After decades of lobbying by various special interest groups to get in one loophole here, an exemption here, and it's so complicated now that everybody has to shape their lives if they want to reduce their taxes and fit the way the government and the politicians want them to run their lives. And I do surveys of my students all the time, and I say, well, do politicians have higher moral and ethical standards than you, or the same, or lower? Almost universally they say, well, lower. Sometimes they say, well, maybe the same, but nobody says that they're higher moral and ethical standards. So I'm always puzzled why, if people broadly believe that the politicians are not trustworthy, you can't trust their campaign promises, they're generally speaking more likely to be dishonest than the general population,
then why do you trust them to shape your values with the tax code? You know, aren't you better at making those decisions on your own than to have politicians do it for you? Well, people view politicians differently than government. You put a whole bunch of politicians together, and then they think, oh, it must be superior to us.
Yeah. Boy, well, I could just talk to you all day. Thanks so much for joining us. And the book is The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible. And this is Ken
available
Schoolland.
from Small Business Hawaii or online at Amazon.com.
Great. Okay, thank you.